Hello everyone, I am the storyteller. Tonight I'll tell you a story shrouded in shadows and secrets, one that begins with a man named Elias Thorne, a forensic psychologist who only meant to investigate a forgotten asylum. He didn't believe in ghosts or curses or things that watch from behind mirrors, but belief doesn't matter when the spiral starts turning. So dim the lights, let the hum of distant thunder calm your breath, and hear what happened when Elias stepped inside a place that doesn't just remember the past, it records you in it. I don't remember driving here. I have the rental receipt. I have a photograph of myself in front of the boundary gate. But if you asked me what road I took to reach this place, I couldn't tell you. I remember dust, miles of it, dust that didn't settle, that hung in the air like smoke. The trees were black skeletons, clawing at a sky far too low. I remember silence that wasn't really silent, just muffled, like I was hearing the world through water. What I do remember, with a clarity that drills into my spine even now, is the sound my boots made when I stepped across the rusted threshold of the Caldera Asylum. That hollow echo, like the floor wasn't wood or concrete, like it was a drumskin stretch tied over something waiting beneath. I'm recording this for the benefit of whoever finds what's left of me, not as a warning, not as an explanation, but because writing helps. And I'm afraid that if I stop, I'll hear it again. The sound, the one only I seemed to hear. The lullaby the forest didn't begin, it swallowed. One moment the sun beat down on the two-lane blacktop, painting heat mirages that shimmered off the windshield. The next, shadows fell like curtains thick, green, absolute. The GPS blinked and died. My phone flashed no signal. Trees pressed in, tall and patient, like they'd been waiting for me longer than I'd been alive. I was 47 miles outside of El Cajon County, New Mexico. No towns, no outposts, no signs except one. A rust-bitten slab of iron with 4 words punched into it: Caldera State Hospital, EST, 189 to closed 1976. No graffiti, no bullet holes, no signs of trespass. It stood untouched by time and vandalism alike, like it existed somewhere else entirely. I parked the Jeep, slid on my coat, checked the old service pistol tucked under the seat, a habit I'd never fully shaken. I'd profiled killers, survivors, cultists, and broken minds for 22 years. Never fired it once. The woods were silent in a way that wasn't natural. No insects, no birds, just the occasional creak, like old boards flexing overhead. And then I saw the gate, cast iron, welded shut decades ago, wrapped in creeping vines like barbed wire made of ivy. Beyond it, the slumped remains of the administrative building, slate roof shattered, windows black and blind. The wind didn't blow here. The air was still, thick. I took a breath, crossed the gate line. That was the first time I heard it, a sound like wind chimes underwater. High, glassy notes, faint, barely audible, but it burrowed behind my eyes like a migraine forming. I turned nothing, just the trees, watching. Inside, the asylum was even worse. The front hall stretched wide and empty, peeling paint like snakeskin. A broken wheelchair overturned near a reception desk that sagged like wet cardboard. Fluorescent light tubes lay in shattered trails across the tile. Faded forms still clung to clipboards nailed to the wall. Discharge summaries, sleep study logs, cognitive map projections. Sleep studies. That's what the asylum had been known for in its final years. Dream restructuring, a program the state quietly buried under budget cuts and mental health reform. I didn't come here because I believed the ghost stories. I came because 7 people had gone missing near the asylum in the past 14 months. Urban explorers, a local ranger, a retired contractor who'd once worked on site. One of them, Laura Keene, a grad student, left behind a recording, 27 seconds, static, faint weeping, and just before the tape cut out, a lullaby. The same one I had heard, a childish melody I somehow recognized, though I'd never heard it before, except maybe I had, because when I stepped deeper into the main corridor, past the collapsed east wing stairwell, and into the administrative records room, I found something else, a file on me, yellowed, warped, but intact, my name, my photo as a child, and the words stamped across the top, Patient 0 for 1, Thorn, Elias. That's when the lights flickered, and the door behind me closed on its own. I didn't move for a long time, not because I was afraid, because I knew if I turned around and that door was locked, everything I believed about myself, about the world, was about to split open. The file still sat in my hands, thin, 4 or 5 sheets at most, bound in rusted clips. The photo on the cover showed a boy maybe 7 years old. Black hair, pale-skinned, wide, and blinking eyes. I don't remember being that child, but he remembered me. Inside the file were documents, notes scribbled in an unfamiliar hand, spidery and urgent, phrases circled in red pencil, recurrent REM intrusions, persistent auditory hallucinations, melodic structure consistent, triggered by proximity to sublevel archives, possible cross-temporal identity bleed. One page was just a drawing, crayons, a single black tree in the center, its roots shaped like open mouths. The sky above it was red, filled with spirals. In the branches hung a figure, featureless, arms too long. Below, at the base of the trunk, was the same thing I had heard the moment I crossed the gate. La la la, la la la, when you sleep the roots will rise. I stuffed the file in my pack, stepped backward. The door groaned, not locked, but it took effort to open, as if the air pressure behind it had changed. I stumbled back into the hallway, blinking. The lights overhead flickered once more, then steadied, and that's when I noticed it. The corridor was longer than before. The administrative wing should have ended in a T-junction. I had taken photographs of the floor plans, but now it stretched on maybe 50 feet farther. The walls bulged, slightly water damaged. I wasn't sure, but there was something organic about the way they curved, like the bones of the building were swelling beneath the paint. I stepped forward. Slowly, my footsteps no longer echoed. About halfway down the new stretch of hall, I passed a door that shouldn't have existed. Room 17B, label, experimental containment, level 1 access only. I stopped, my breath fogged, though the air was dry. The handle was cold. Then I heard it, knocking from inside, 3 taps, slow dot, dot, then silence. My heart was a drum in my ears. I reached for the door, touched the knob. It turned on its own. Just a twitch, just enough. I stepped back. I didn't open it, not then, but something wanted me to. Outside the asylum, the world was slipping. I walked the perimeter that evening, hoping the sunlight might reset something in my head. The trees weren't right. I counted them. From the north wall to the rusted chapel entrance, I passed 31 trees, birch, juniper, and one twisted pine that looked like it had been struck by lightning. I made a mental note of the formation. Then I circled back. There were 33 trees. No whine, no footsteps but mine, no time gap. But 2 new trees stood where there had been open dirt, smaller than the others, black bark. Their roots twisted above the ground, like hands gripping the earth. I didn't count again. That night I dreamed for the first time since I arrived in the dream. I was walking the hallway again, but the walls were pulsing, wet and red. The light overhead buzzed like insects. A child's voice sang the lullaby behind me, always just out of sight. I reached the door marked 17B, opened it. Inside, the spiral staircase, carved from bone, leading down into darkness. At the bottom was the tree, but it wasn't a tree. It was made of faces, thousands of them, mouths sewn shut, eyes open, weeping black sap. In the center, seated cross-legged, was a man. He had my face, only older and smiling. When I woke, the song was still playing, not in my head, in the hallway, and the door to my room, the one I'd locked, was open. Morning never really came. The sky turned a sickly brown-gray around 6, casting long shadows across the asylum grounds, the kind of light that made it hard to tell the time or direction. I tried the radio, dead. Tried my phone again. Nothing but a low hum when I put it to my ear, like the inside of a television from another room, always on, always tuned to something. The wind had picked up, but it didn't move the trees. The grass rustled, the dust blew, but the trees, they stood still, stiff as if braced for something. I took a long breath, pulled out my recorder. Entry 3, 7:15 a.m. I dreamt of the containment door again. This time the face at the bottom of the stairs spoke. It said, "You've been here before. You just didn't know the word for it." I stopped, erased the last sentence, spoke again, slower this time. Symptoms of isolation exposure. Auditory carryover from hypnagogic states. This is stress. This is my mind protecting itself from dissonant stimuli. There is no pattern. There is no song, but I could still hear it. Not the lullaby now, something else, a dry, rhythmic clicking, like bone tapping against glass, coming from the stairwell that led to the lower maintenance levels where the power junctions and old record vaults were buried. I remembered seeing it on the floor plans. It had been sealed off in 1970 for after a collapse. No way down, and yet the sound came, measured, purposeful. The hallway felt longer again. I measured it this time, laid my flashlight end to end. 72 steps last night, today. 89. The door to room 17B now sat farther from the file room, but the numbering hadn't shifted. The building wasn't just stretching, it was growing. I forced myself to focus on something I could verify: the files. I returned to the administration office and began going through patient records. Most were water damaged beyond recognition, names dissolved, pages stuck together, but 2 folders caught my attention and touched, sealed in a box marked reserved for transfer. Patient 019, Helen Greaves. Patient 040, Adrian Keller. That last name hit like a hammer. Adrian Keller wasn't a patient. He was my mentor, taught at the Bureau's Psychological Profiling Division for 15 years. retired quietly after a breakdown in 2008, vanished 2 years later. The file said otherwise. According to Caldera's records, Keller had been admitted in 1975, treated for linguistic echolalia and recursive ideation, listed as unresponsive. Final note: subject refuses to answer to his own name, responds only to the archivist. That wasn't just wrong, it was impossible, unless Keller hadn't left the Bureau because of burnout, unless he hadn't left at all, unless he'd been here and never left. I turned the page. There, stapled to the back cover, was a photograph, black and white, faded. It showed a group of patients standing outside the chapel, backs to the camera. One of them looked just like me, older, thinner, but me, same stance, same scar above the left brow. I touched it without thinking. It tingled. I flipped the photo over. Someone had scrawled in pen, "This place remembers what we forget." Later that day I walked to the chapel. The door was still chained, locked shut with rusted iron, but someone had left footprints in the dust leading up to it, bare feet, small, child-sized, and on the door, just below the hinges, someone had scratched a word into the wood, "Sing." I didn't stay long that night. I had the second nightmare. This one wasn't in the asylum. It was before. I was back in a room I didn't recognize. Yellow wallpaper, cracked mirror, the smell of talc and copper. A voice behind me said, "You have to go back. You left something down there." I turned. No one. But the mirror showed a child sitting in the corner, knees to chest, humming the lullaby. His eyes were stitched shut, and in his lap, my recorder, playing something I hadn't recorded yet. When I woke, my hands were wrapped around the recorder like I was trying to choke it. It was playing on its own. You left something down there. End chapter 3. By the fourth day, my reflections had started lying. Not in obvious ways, not right away. They blinked just slightly offbeat. They raised their hands a breath too late. Their mouths formed words before mine did. Watching myself became a test I didn't know I was taking and losing. That morning I avoided mirrors entirely. No shaving, no looking at the windows. Even the glint off a spoon made me uneasy. Instead, I went looking for Keller, not because I thought I'd find him, but because I already had. In the dream, in the file, in my voice. The sub-levels were never meant for patients. According to blueprints, they were for archival storage, backup power, and what one faded memo from 1973 called consciousness stabilization studies, whatever that meant. The stairwell was blocked by rusted chain, hazard, elapsed structure spray-painted across a sagging plank. But someone had gone through. The chain had been pulled aside and rewrapped hastily, sloppily, like they didn't want to keep people out so much as keep suspicion down. I stepped past it. The air changed immediately, heavy, like the atmosphere thickened halfway down. Smelled like whetstone and copper wiring. Half the lights were out. The others flickered in a slow, deliberate rhythm as if sensing with a beat I couldn't hear. I counted steps. 56, 57, 58. I stopped. There were no more steps, just wall. But I hadn't reached the bottom. There should have been 20 more. I touched the bricks, cold, damp. Then I noticed the door in the wall, no handle. Just a slit across the wood where light leaked out soft, reddish yellow, like firelight, and then a voice, calm, rhythmic, barely audible through the gap. We must unpeel the hours. We must loosen the knots in the dream. We must file the soul, it said file, like a document, like something to be catalogued. Then I heard my name, Dr. Elias Thorne, patient, observer, returnee, come in. The door didn't open. It wasn't a door anymore. Just the wall, same as before. I backed away, traced my steps up, but the stairwell had changed. The lights were off, completely, and the steps I'd just climbed gone. Just a smooth slope upward into blackness, no handrail, no texture. Only the wall beside me remained the same, etched with one phrase, gouged deep into the stone. You are not a guest, you are a record. I don't know how I got back to the main floor. I remember climbing, crawling, dry-mouthed and dizzy. I woke just before sunset, lying outside in the dead grass beside the asylum. There were footprints around me, a child circling like a spiral, and in the dirt next to me, drawn with a stick or finger. The archivist wants to see you. That night I had the third dream. This one was different. It was quiet. I stood in a library, massive, circular, towering shelves built into the walls. No windows, no exits. The air buzzed with pressure, like I was underwater, miles deep. Each shelf contained boxes, patient files, photos, dreams. I walked past one labeled Thorne, ELIAS file incomplete, and then another, Thorne, ELIAS observer error, and a third Thorne, ELIAS return deny. Then came the sound, not the lullaby, not clicking, something older, like 1,000 whispering mouths, too tired to speak aloud. Speaking through me, I turned, and there he was, Keller. Only not Keller, taller, wrapped in white cloth, like a moth's cocoon unraveling, face hidden, hands ink-stained, moving slowly down the aisle of memories, He stopped in front of me, raised a hand, opened a black folder, pulled out a page. You were never supposed to wake up, he said. You were meant to rest, to forget. I tried to speak, but my mouth was full of ash, He leaned closer. I saw his face. It was mine, older, blind. He smiled. Archivists don't leave, Elias. They just change rooms. I woke up to find my boots missing, and the file on Keller gone. In its place was a fresh folder, no dust, no mildew, just one word stamped across it, reclassify. Martha Green found me in the chapel ruins. I was kneeling in the ash, tracing the spiral again, one of many that had begun to appear across the asylum grounds, burnt into the soil, etched into walls, scratched onto the undersides of desks, doors, even inside my notebook. They were always there. I realized I just never looked in the right light. People say you're stubborn, Martha said, her boots crunching over debris, but I see a man who's already halfway gone and just hasn't noticed. She was in her 60s, long braid, skin like cured leather. She spoke like someone who'd learned to make words do more than talk, make them threaten, distract, conceal. I stood brushing soot from my hands. You left something at my cabin, I said. She cocked her head. You think so? A folder, file on Keller. It's gone now. She didn't blink. Then it wasn't meant to be found. Her tone made it clear. She had taken it, but it was something else she said next that stopped my breath cold. He taught me to listen to the walls, you know. Back when I was a girl, Keller. I mean, what? Only he wasn't Keller back then. He was Mr. Albright. said he was a dream teller. Said if I wrote my dreams down and brought 'em to him, he'd keep 'em safe in a box. I brought him a new one every Sunday for 3 years. Her eyes flicked to mine. He never forgot a single one. Even told me the endings before I dreamed 'em. We sat near the chapel's broken altar, drinking from my thermos. I watched dust fall in thin beams through the shattered roof. Martha took out a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth, opened it. Inside, a collection of yellowed paper scraps. Childish handwriting, crayon drawings, my dreams, she said. Or what's left of them. One showed a spiral in red. Another, a room full of people wearing masks shaped like animals. One drawing was just a black dot surrounded by mouths, with a single sentence written beneath. This is the room that eats you. I turned it over. The back said, Dream number 58, FEB 1974. I felt sick. My hand tingled. Do you still dream like this? I asked. Martha didn't answer right away. She stared at the collapsed altar then. I stopped dreaming after I heard it speak. It didn't say words. It just understood me, like the sound was already inside my bones, and it just made them remember. What did it want? Her voice dropped to a whisper. It wants to be recorded. That's what it is. It's not a thing. It's not a spirit or a demon or some myth. It's information, hungry to be remembered. It doesn't feed on flesh. It feeds on meaning. That night I tried not to sleep. I drank coffee, paced, took cold showers, read through the only files that hadn't gone missing yet, but I drifted anyway. Somewhere between 3:10 and 3:30 a.m., and the third nightmare changed again. This time I was inside the walls. Not inside a room, inside the structure itself. The plaster peeled away like skin. The wires were veins, the floors pulsed, the hallways inhaled, and in the narrow dark between support beams and cracked stone I saw them. The other versions of me, pale, empty-eyed, crawling, watching, waiting. Each wore a different expression. Guilt, terror, euphoria, confusion, all mouthing something silently. Their hands scraped symbols into the stone. They parted as I passed, not out of fear but recognition. At the end of the passage sat a wooden desk, a single candle, and an open file folder. I looked inside, a photo of Martha Green. As a child, a drawing of a spiral, a voice mind whispering from behind. You're not investigating the place, Elias. The place is investigating you. I woke in the chapel, again, dust in my mouth. Spiral carved into the floor beside me, not by me, and next to my hand, a crumpled sheet of notebook paper, folded, slightly damp. I opened it. Crayon. A child's drawing, the chapel, a figure on fire at the altar. Below it, a line scrawled in looping hand. This is where he speaks through your voice. I didn't remember drawing it, but the handwriting matched mine, age 6. I found Lena Morales where the map said the courtyard should be, only there was no courtyard, just an open scar in the ground, rimmed with collapsed brick and half-buried railings. The earth had caved in decades ago, swallowing what must have once been a garden or congregation space. The hole looked bottomless, like the world had cracked and something had opened its eye below. She sat near the edge, camera tripod planted in front of her, filming nothing. I didn't expect company, she said without turning. Likewise, I muttered, Lena had the sharp-eyed focus of someone who didn't scare easily, but fear wasn't the problem out here. It wasn't about adrenaline or survival instincts. This place didn't want you to run, it wanted you to watch. And Lena was already watching too much. She finally looked at me. "You're Thorne, the psychologist, the one who talks to killers." "That's one way to put it." "You're recording, too?" I nodded. She didn't ask what I'd seen, just handed me a pair of headphones. "Listen to this. I recorded it 2 nights ago. Didn't hear anything live but on playback." I pressed them on. The sound hit like a whisper through glass. A song maybe, not quite the lullaby, slower, deeper, interspersed with a low droning, like a voice speaking backward and a dry throat, but underneath it all, barely audible. A child's voice repeating 3 words, "Not the dream, not the dream, not the dream." I pulled the headphones off. My mouth had gone dry. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think the recording isn't broken." "We are." Lena followed me back to the East Wing. We traded information, details, timelines, symbols. She'd been cataloging spiral markings and found over 27 variations across the site, all subtly different. Some matched Zuni sun glyphs, others resembled Sumerian sigils, none were identical. She said one had shown up inside her sleeping bag, burned into the fabric. She hadn't lit a fire that night. I showed her the drawing I'd found, the chapel on fire, the words, "This is where he speaks through your voice." Lena went pale. I drew the same thing. She said, "When I was 9, in a church in Durango, my parents made me burn it." She didn't ask how that was possible. She just accepted it, like we both understood by now. The asylum didn't care where you were born, only where you belonged. Later that evening, we heard it again, clicking, not like before, not bone against glass. This was language, measured, layered, coming from the old patient auditorium, the room, the schematics labeled as behavioral theater. Observation tier C. I'd never been inside. It wasn't supposed to exist, but there it was. The door opened before we reached it, slowly, like breath. Inside, row upon row of decayed seats, all facing a stage half collapsed from water damage. The curtains had rotted into strips, debris everywhere but on the stage. Faces, hundreds carved into the wall, some old, some recent, some with mouths sewn shut, others screaming, all partially submerged in the plaster. Lena raised her camera. "What the hell is this?" I stepped closer. One of the faces near the base looked fresh. Pig skin, eyes shut. I touched it, cold. And then, without warning, it opened its eyes, slowly, silently, dot, dot, and in my own voice, it whispered, "We are the record, Elias. You're already written down. You can't leave until you finish becoming." The wall rippled, and every mouth began to hum, not in unison but in rhythm, like a hive of lullabies all fighting for dominance. I staggered back, clutching my head. Lena screamed, then silence. The faces closed their eyes, the mouths stopped. The wall became just wall again, but something had been transferred into us. I felt it, heavy, nesting just behind the eyes. "Did you hear what I heard?" I asked. Lena didn't answer. She just stared at the stage, then whispered. It knew my name. That night, neither of us spoke. We sat by the chapel ruins, trading turns, watching the tree line. The forest no longer felt like it ended. The dark between the trunks stretched wrong, as if it didn't obey the shape of the world anymore. And when the wind finally really moved, it didn't blow through the trees. It came from underneath them, from the hollow below. Time broke the next morning, not in the poetic sense, not like deja vu or a lost hour. I mean, it snapped. I woke in the administration hall, head pounding. I remembered falling asleep in the chapel ruins with Lena nearby. I remembered fireflies, a sound like teeth chattering in the trees, then nothing. Now I was back inside. Same chair I'd sat in 3 days earlier, same broken clock on the wall. 4:13 a.m., same ash footprint on the tile, my footprint from that first night. I checked my watch. It read for 13 a.m. I walked outside. The trees hadn't moved. The air hadn't warmed. The sun hadn't risen. It wasn't dawn. It was replaying. I ran to Lena's camp spot. No gear, no camera, no Lena. I called her name, nothing. I tried the chapel sealed again. The spiral gone, the altar untouched. The world had rewound, but not cleanly. A warped copy of yesterday leading in on itself. I returned to the file room, flipped open my notebook, and stopped. The last page read, Elias, you have to break the loop. We're stuck. This isn't the first time. You've written this before. It was in my handwriting. Different pen dot, different pressure. Same voice below that. Taped to the page ripped from a different notebook entirely was a photo. Lena standing in front of the carved face wall on the stage. Mouth open. Not screaming, singing. I never took that photo, but I remembered it, like a dream someone else had and told me too well. By the time I circled back to the behavioral theater, the door was missing. No stage, no wall of faces, just hallway, bare, clean, but the air felt still, as if it were watching me back. I sat against the wall and recorded a new entry. Entry, I don't know. The loop has started or maybe restarted. The asylum's no longer recording time linearly. It's building a feedback structure. It's using memory as architecture. It's making me walk old paths so I forget which ones were mine. I listened back to the recording immediately. Only what played wasn't what I said. The voice on the tape was mine, but slower, hollow, like it had been buried for a century. The pattern is a mouth. You keep stepping into it. Singing is just breathing backwards. Don't look at the mirror when it smiles. Don't trust the water. And if you hear the archivist counting, you're already part of the index. Hours passed, maybe. Eventually I found someone else. But it wasn't Lena. It was Sam Whitaker, the old groundskeeper who'd reportedly gone missing 6 months earlier. He stood in the archway between the crematorium ruins and the medical wing, hands behind his back, staring at a dead oak tree wrapped in chains. He looked older than any man I'd ever seen. Eyes milk-glass white, skin like old newspaper. But his voice was calm, precise. Been watching you, Lou. Doctor, he said without turning. You've seen this before? I asked. I've seen 100 of you. Some scream, some cry. Most forget they're repeating. But you, he turned, you always resist. That's why it keeps bringing you back. What is it? Sam's eyes glistened. It doesn't have a name. It's the space between stories. The silence when a dream ends, but hasn't faded yet. And this, he gestured to the asylum. This is its mouth. Then how do I stop it? You don't, he said, but you can bite back. Sam reached into his coat and handed me a folded page. water stain, tattered, a diagram, a map of the asylum, but different. Rotated, expanded, it showed tunnels beneath the basement, levels not listed anywhere else. At the very bottom, marked in red ink, Room 0, Route Index. I looked up. Sam was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just dust where he'd stood. The sun never rose that day, because the day never ended. It just kept repeating, bending slightly, folding inward. The clocks stayed at 4:13. The sky stayed gray, the voices hummed in my ears, and my reflection in the chapel's shattered mirror finally spoke on its own. Go deeper. Elias, you're not at the beginning. You're at the restart. And Chapter 7. I waited until the clock blinked for 13 a.m. again. That flicker, the half-second pulse when the asylum reset itself, was the only moment that felt unwritten. Like the script stuttered, I used it. Found the panel behind the records room shelf. Pried it open, wood, not drywall seal, from the inside. Smelled like fungus and coal copper. Behind it, a tunnel, not on the map, not on any map, but it matched Sam's diagram. No lights, no stairs, just a downward slope, wrapped in old conduit and riveted metal. It was too narrow to stand upright. I crawled, breath scraping, knees aching. The sound of my movement swallowed by the walls. About 30 feet down, the air changed, drier, more still. I emerged into a corridor so black it felt like falling. Shined my flashlight. The walls were curved like a rib cage. Root systems slithered through the seams. Every few feet, a red mark on the wall, a spiral drawn with something that wasn't ink. Maybe not blood either, maybe something older. The silence down here was total. My ears rang from it. The path forked once left and right. I remembered the map. Go right, I did. The room at the end wasn't a room. It was a hollow, earthen, wet. Something had been dug out and then buried again. Faint echoes whispered beneath the surface, like distant breathing, like thoughts leaking through stone. In the center sat a box, six-sided, made of polished bone, no latch, no seam. A single word carved on the top, archive. I didn't touch it. I sat beside it, and I listened. At first, nothing, then, gradually faint voices, not in language, not even sound, just impressions, the taste of ash. The sound of my father yelling. When I was 12, the smell of my first autopsy. A child's hand tugging my sleeve in a dream I never remembered having. The box was recording me. Not now, always. It's always been you, Elias, said a voice behind me. You're the first archivist. We just keep writing you over. I turned. Dr. Adrian Keller stood at the edge of the room. Only he wasn't a man anymore. He was what the asylum remembered of him. Half-face, wrapped in paper strips, skin made of peeling photographs. His voice echoed like magnetic tape spooling backward. You asked what it wants, he said. It wants to exist. And to exist, it needs eyes. It needs a witness. I backed away. What is this place? He smiled, or at least folded in a way that suggested smiling. It's the negative of a story, Elias, not what happened, what was refused. Every fear they didn't say out loud, every scream that got drugged quiet, every prayer the walls soaked in and never answered. This asylum was a womb. What it birthed ... His memory that wants a body. I asked him, why me? His answer came without hesitation. because you left, because you forgot, and because, deep down, you still don't believe any of this is real. He was right. I still clung to causality, psychology, rational decay of a fractured mind. I looked back at the box. It was open now, inside, a mirror. Not glass, not reflection. It showed me in a hospital bed, hooked to machines, lips moving, monitors spiking, a real hospital. Somewhere far away, Keller stepped behind me. We never left Caldera. Elias, you've been here since the beginning. You're still here now. Every time you dream of escape, the asylum eats the dream and records a new failure. The hallway behind us began to hum. Low, electric, static lace, footsteps. They're coming, Keller said. Versions of you that didn't fight, didn't remember. The index is rebalancing. It's choosing which one gets out. I grabbed the box. Then I'll choose. I ran upward through the tunnel. The walls flexed. The roots moved like veins. The air screamed. At the top, daylight, real daylight. For the first time in a week or maybe a year, the sun had risen. I burst into the clearing, gasping. Lena stood at the tree line, pale, watching. You found it, she said quietly. No, I said, I think it found me. She nodded toward the asylum. Then you know what comes next. Behind me, the door slammed shut on its own. The box pulsed in my hands. The mirror inside was cracked now, and the only reflection it showed was not mine. The box wouldn't stop humming. I kept it wrapped in my coat, buried at the bottom of my pack, but it sang to me through the layers. No melody, no rhythm, just a low, continuous pressure in the center of my skull, like I was being whispered into by a voice that had forgotten how to stop. Lena didn't ask to see it. She just stared at my hands. You're not carrying it, she said. It's carrying you. We returned to the admin wing. The hallway had shifted again, narrower now, like a throat. Every surface was damp, not wet, damp, touched, as if the building had begun sweating. I reached the file room. Every cabinet was open, every drawer pulled, folders torn. Ink bled across pages like veins. Only one folder sat untouched at the center of the room. Caldera Index redacted 1976. I opened it. Inside, a declassified document, stamp, Department of Advanced Human Cognition, Black Ridge Branch. A grainy black and white photograph of Keller standing in front of a chalkboard full of spirals. A hand-drawn map labeled Test Subject Exposure Zones, and a page marked Confirmation of Phase for Manifestations with the following type. Note: the entity is not confined to physical space. It is a perceptual virus constructed from collective trauma and sustained through repetition. Closure of the facility will not erase it. It must be contained within a host pattern, preferably one susceptible to recursion, self-erasure, and cognitive bleed. At the bottom, a handwritten line scrawled in red ink, Keller's handwriting. It's not a ghost. It's an unfinished story looking for someone to write the ending. We didn't talk for a while after that. Outside, the wind had picked up. Only the trees still weren't moving. Instead, the shadows were darker than before, twitching, elongating against the grain of light. I glanced at Lena. How long have you actually been here? She hesitated, then said, I arrived 6 days after my sister disappeared. She came here as a grad student, documented the asylum, never came back. What was her name? She opened her mouth to answer, and stopped, confused. I don't know, she whispered. She pulled out a photo from her jacket, old, folded too many times, 2 girls, standing in front of the gate. That the second girl's face had been scratched out. Lena stared at the photo. I used to remember, she said. Her name was on my tongue every day, but since I came here I finished it for her. The asylum is unwriting her that night I slept. Not by choice, I blacked out mid-sentence while recording, and dreamed the 4th dream. This one was a recording room. Sterile, windowless, reels spinning, tape hissing, rows of beds. Each bed held a version of me, sleeping, screaming, singing, and standing in the corner. The archivist, faceless now, hands made of keys, index cards for teeth. He approached one of the beds, mine, the one that matched my current age, whispered something into my sleeping ear, then turned to me. We can't contain this, Elias. We can only catalog the damage. He handed me a single file, paper crackling like skin. You still think you're sick, he said. That's how it survives. You give it dot. It gives you structure. I looked down at the file. It was blank except for one word, host. I woke choking. The box had opened on its own again. Inside, no mirror this time, just a tooth. Human incisor, blood-flecked, still warm, and carved into its enamel. Tell the story or it will tell you. The next morning, Lena was gone. In her place, her camera, still recording. I played back the footage. Last frame. Her standing by the asylum gate, looking outward, her mouth open, whispering. The tape ended in static and silence, and somewhere in that silence was my voice singing. I didn't want to go back underground. Every part of my body ached at the thought. My fingers trembled. My breath felt like it was drawing through wet cotton, but I knew what the box wanted now. It wasn't just collecting, it was testing, and I had passed some invisible threshold. When I stepped back into the tunnel beneath the administration wing, it was different, warmer, wetter. The air was closer, pressing in against my ears like I was walking into the center of a womb. The symbols on the wall pulsed. Not metaphorically, they glowed dimly, blood red, rhythmic, like breathing. I followed the same path down the slope, right at the fore, past the broken arch that hadn't been broken last time, through the dripping corridor of exposed rebar and gnarled tree roots. The root index was waiting, but it had changed. The chamber had grown. The floor sagged like a heartbeat. The ceiling arched in strange geometric flares, shifting every time I blinked, like it couldn't decide whether it was a cave, a cathedral, or a wound. The box was gone. In its place, something worse. A mirror 10 feet high, framed in spiral bone, breathing. I swear to you it breathed. With every inhale the surface fogged, with every exhale it cleared. And on that clearing surface I saw not myself, but versions of myself, one after another, one screaming, one sobbing, one whispering something over and over, one grinning wide with eyes rolled back, and one calm, still smiling. The calm one stared out and said, "You made it this far last time, too." Behind me, footsteps. I turned. The archivist, no longer disguised in human form, now folded open, like a book with too many pages, limbs spiraled. His voice was paper tearing itself in half. "You've already chosen, Elias. This is just the echo of that choice. I shouted at him, "What do you want from me?" He tilted his head in a movement to fluid, to wrong. "You misunderstand. You're the only one who ever wanted anything. You wanted to know, to explain, to hold the horror in your hand and call it a diagnosis. That was your invitation." He gestured to the mirror. "Go ahead. Finish your profile. Just know, once you understand it, it will wear your skin." I stepped closer to the mirror. The images shifted. Not versions of me now, memories. Replayed wrong, altered, infested. My mother's funeral, except the casket whispered. My first interrogation, except I was the one being questioned. A motel room in Montana where I'd had my first panic attack, but in the mirror. Someone else was having it, and watching me. I looked deeper, saw a basement. A child, 7 years old, sitting against the wall, holding a recorder, playing the lullaby, his lips moving, his eyes sewn shut. The child turned his head toward me, spoke. "You didn't leave me behind. You buried me here. You made the story about monsters, so you'd never have to remember who let them in." The mirror rippled. From it emerged a hand, not to strike, not to pull, to offer. It held a folder. I took it, my file. The original, unredacted, every page intact inside. Psychological assessment from 1987. Dream sketches from age 8. A therapy transcript I never remembered attending. And at the bottom, a blank sheet with the check boxes. Observer, archivist. A line beneath them read, "Choose your function, or it will choose for you." Behind me, the mirror laughed. No, it read. It recited my dreams back to me in reverse order. Every line, every spiral, every name I had forgotten. My voice caught. I checked a box. I don't remember which. The mirror exploded inward. No glass, no sound, just absence. Like the world blinked out of reality for half a second. When I opened my eyes, I was in the chapel. Midday sunlight. Bird song, my pack beside me. The box gone. No Lena, no Keller, no spiral in the dust, just peace, just nothing. But in my coat pocket, folded tight, a small piece of paper. On it, "You've been indexed. You may resume your pattern." And beneath that, for 13 a.m., I left Caldera on foot. No broken chain, no gate, no howling wind behind me, just the dirt road stretching out, scrub brush waving like nothing had ever happened here, as if the place had coughed me out and smoothed the sand behind me, erasing the evidence. My body felt hollow, but not weak, more like the shell after something molts. I made it to the edge of Valcon County by dusk. A sheriff's cruiser spotted me walking barefoot along Route 19, and I said all the right things. Claimed I was an anthropologist, lost my group, no ID, no phone, just a name and a look that said, "Don't press this." The deputy nodded too quickly, like he'd been waiting for me, like he recognized me but couldn't place why. They took me to a clinic, gave me food, water, warm sheets. I didn't sleep because I knew the pattern, and I knew the number for 13 a.m. That night I sat in the clinic bathroom, hands trembling over the faucet, water dripping rhythmically, light above the mirror flickering just slightly. 3 short, 1 long pause, then again. 3 short, 1 long pause, Morse code. I turned the water off. Behind me, in the mirror, I saw the hallway outside. Not my reflection, the hallway, but no one was there, just sound, a soft static hum, like a radio between stations, then the faintest whisper, spiral in, spiral out. Your mind is just a hallway, let us walk it. I left that night, hitchhiked north, hit Denver, then Cheyenne. I didn't tell anyone who I was, didn't use my name, but it followed me. I saw it in newspapers, a spiral-shaped toll spill in Oklahoma. I heard it in train stations, kids humming tunes that bet slightly off-key. I smelled it in restrooms, gold smoke, and lavender, the scent from the asylum infirmary, now bleeding through the vents of modern buildings. Reality wasn't holding shape, and the box, though I'd left it behind, had become something else. A presence, a prompt, a logic that walked beside me. In Oregon, I rented a cabin for 3 nights, remote, on a cliff overlooking the sea. I needed time to think, needed silence. The first night was quiet. The second night, I dreamed of Lena. She sat in a library, pages of photos spread before her, not photos of the asylum, photos of me as a child, me now, me somewhere else. Smiling, Lena said nothing. She just slid one of the photos toward me. I looked down. It was a screenshot of my recorder. The interface blinking. One message displayed. New file received. Spiral_thorn.law. I woke, gasping, checked my phone. Battery at 4%. Time. For 13 a.m. I opened the voice memo app. My hands shook. A new file had been added. I hadn't recorded it. I pressed play. My own voice, quiet, tired, desperate. If you're hearing this, it means you made it out, but you didn't leave. Not really. The logic followed. It doesn't live in places, it lives in stories, and now it lives in you. A pause. This was never a haunting, it was an infection, a contagious structure, a shape, a song, a question without an answer. What happens when trauma refuses to die? Every story needs a reader. Every pattern needs a mind to hold it. Tag Elias Urit. The file ended in silence, but just before the timestamp clicked over, I heard it barely. La la la, la la la. I smashed the phone. Drove 8 hours with no music, no radio, no thinking. Just gas stations and asphalt and a need to outrun something that had already parked itself in my bloodstream. But by the time I hit the Idaho border, the signs had changed. Literally. Highway exit 113 now read. Caldera next right. There is no caldera in Idaho. There shouldn't be, and yet I knew if I took that exit, I'd find it again, because it wasn't a place anymore. It was me. I didn't take the caldera exit, but it didn't matter. It was waiting anyway. And people, and mirrors, and me. The gas station attendant in Twin Falls wore a name tag that said M. Green. When I asked what the M stood for, she didn't blink, just smiled. Memory, same gray eyes, same cracked knuckles. Her voice, just a bit too slow, like she was reading from a script she only half understood. When I turned away, I saw her watching me in the security mirror. Except in the reflection, her lips were moving, and the only sound was a lullaby. I checked into a motel under a fake name, left the TV on static, sat on the carpet, cross-legged, watching the ceiling pulse. The phone rang at 4:13 a.m. No ringtone, no caller ID. I answered. Silence. Then, Elias, the page is turning. It was my voice, older, hoarse, followed by something else. A slapping sound, wet and rhythmic, like footsteps in a flooded basement. Then a third voice, female, calm. All stories end in silence. The trick is not to stop writing. Click. I started seeing the spiral everywhere. Salt rings on cafe tables, the frost pattern on my rear windshield, the way people looked at me just a second too long, like they knew, like they were watching something through me. The next day I caught my reflection moving out of sync again. This time it didn't bother hiding. It stared right back, mouth curling, and whispered something I couldn't hear. I leaned in, pressed my ear to the mirror, and the surface sucked in a breath. That's when I understood. It didn't want to hurt me. It wanted me to take its place. I fled again, south, Utah desert, rented a trailer, disconnected everything. No internet, no clocks, no calendar. I started writing it all down. Everything from day one, from Caldera, from before, what I remembered, what I couldn't, what I suspected. Pages stacked around me like bones, but every time I read them back, the details shifted. Dates reversed, locations blurred, names scratched out. Every I became he, every he became was, every was became file. The story was writing me now. Then the visitors came. First, a park ranger. Said he was checking on the power grid, except his shirt had no insignia, no badge. And he asked too many questions about dreams. Then a man in a suit, claimed to be FBI, showed a badge that didn't reflect light, asked if I'd seen any recursive symbology. When I asked for his name, he said, Thorn. I didn't sleep for 3 days, and when I finally did, I didn't wake up in the trailer. I woke up in a hospital bed. White room, flickering lights, one window. Outside it, a black tree with roots like mouths. I screamed. A nurse entered. Martha Green, again, older or younger. I couldn't tell. She smiled. You're doing much better today, Elias. We've got your chart. Would you like to see your file? She held it out. Patient 0 for 1. Returnee protocol. Spiral logic exposure. I refused, tried to stand. Found Lena sitting in the chair by the bed. Only it wasn't Lena. It was someone using her face. Eyes wrong. Too glassy, too flat. She spoke with a smile. We know the story hurts, but stories are how we contain it. You understand that now, don't you? I tried to speak. My mouth was filled with paper. I woke back in the trailer, alone, sweating, shaking. Next to me, a single printed sheet, typed, perfectly formatted. Chapter 12, the place that wears faces, in which the subject begins to understand that identity is a permeable construct and containment is narrative. He is now dreaming from the outside in. At the bottom, a question typed in bold. Would you like to continue the story? Yes, no. I reached for a pen, and my hand moved without me. I didn't check the box, but something did. When I woke, my hand had written a word in black ink across the inside of my wrist. Not a phrase, not a sentence, just one word, shaky and deliberate. Yes, the skin around it was blistered. The ink wasn't from any pen I owned. The trailer was gone, or maybe I was. I opened the door expecting sand, sky, distant road noise. Instead, fog, dense, chemical, humming like a warm refrigerator. The world outside buzzed. Like it was buffering, I stepped out and heard the dream speaking for the first time. It didn't speak in words, not really. It spoke in feelings I hadn't earned, nostalgia for places I'd never been, guilt for choices I never made, love for a face I couldn't remember but desperately missed, each thought layered atop the last, each memory echoing with another voice, all versions of me bleeding into one another like stacked transparencies in a light box. And beneath it all, a rhythm, the lullaby slowed, drawn out like breath through cracked teeth. La, 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 I walked through the fog. It led me to a place that should not exist, but I'd seen it before in the dreams, in the mirror, in the index, a room beneath all other rooms. The first room, the origin. It looked like a mine shaft, rough-hewn walls, stone-soaked with centuries, the ceiling sagged with old timber, and the floor was thick with symbols carved deep into the rock spirals within spirals. And in the center, seated in a chair made of nothing, was the boy, the same boy from the earliest dream, the boy with my eyes, my mouth, my scar sewn shut. His fingers tapped against the floor in a steady beat. Not music, counting dot, dot. He stopped when I approached. The silence after was more unbearable than any sound. Then he spoke. "You remember me now," he said. "I'm the first time you broke. Before the bureau, before the files, before you learned to explain everything, I fell to my knees. You locked me in the walls. Elias, you put me where they couldn't find me. But the place remembered, the story kept circling. You just kept changing which name you gave the scream." The boy stood. He handed me something. A photograph, grainy, black and white, an aerial shot. The asylum, but older, before construction. Just a burned-out chapel surrounded by forests, no buildings yet, no roads. In the center of the clearing, a single spiral carved into the earth, larger than any I'd seen, 50 feet across. At the bottom of the photo, scribbled in pen, "Caldera equals not a place, Caldera equals an opening." "You didn't find the dream," the boy said. "It found you long before you called it trauma." Then he did something I couldn't follow. He stepped into the floor, not into a hole, into the story itself. The spiral glowed, shifted, became a mouth, became a clock, became a wound, and before he disappeared entirely, I heard him whisper, "We all come back to where we were silenced. The only way out is to speak it." I woke back in the trailer. Sunset bleeding through torn curtains, a spiral carved into my chest. Not deep, not fresh, old, scarred, as if it had always been there, beneath the skin, waiting for me to remember it. On the table, a page from my notebook I didn't write, type, perfect. Chapter 13. The Dream That Spoke First. Subject Elias Thorne has accessed primary pattern core, external containment compromise, mimetic vectors confirmed, field operation, failed narrative assimilation, proceeding. At the bottom, next chapter begins at 4:13 a.m. The clock flipped for 13 a.m., and I felt something inside me shift. Not pain, not fear, a reordering, like pages in a book turning of their own accord, like thoughts being shelved. I tried to stand, my knees buckled, not from weakness but from a gravity that didn't belong to the world. My limbs didn't answer like they used to, like they were no longer mine. Because they weren't, not entirely. They belonged to the story now. The trailer began to blur. Walls softened. Floor bled into grass. I stepped forward and fell through it like walking off the edge of a sentence into the next paragraph. When I opened my eyes, I was in my childhood home. Only wrong angles, too symmetrical, like it had been reconstructed from memory by someone who didn't understand what homes are for. There were no photos, only drawings, spirals, faces with no eyes, doors that opened into staircases that led to nothing. On the kitchen table, a typewriter, not mine, holder, metal, clacking, it typed by itself. Each keystroke shook the floor a little. The walls started whispering. Not in English, not in any language, but I understood. It was telling me my own thoughts, just slightly out of sync. A 2-second delay between what I felt and what the walls reflected back. Every decision, every doubt. Every lie I'd told myself to keep functioning, the walls said, you joined the Bureau because you needed answers. You stayed because answers made the screaming quieter. You came to Caldera because something in you always remembered. I moved through the house. Each room was a chapter. The living room played my first interview with a serial offender, a young man who talked about spiders in his sleep. I remembered dismissing him. He'd hung himself in holding to days later. The bedroom replayed a moment I had never told anyone, age 9, locked in the basement by my father after a sleepwalking episode. No food, no light. 3 days I had scratched a spiral into the floor to keep from forgetting which way was up. I entered the bathroom. The mirror was waiting. No reflection, only text. You are no longer Elias Thorne. You are the pattern. You are the observer. You are the archivist. You are the echo of the first scream that was never answered. I asked aloud, am I dead? The mirror replied, no, you're documented. Then came the worst part. I turned behind me. My mother, smiling, mouth sewn shut, eyes weeping ink. She opened her arms. Her voice came not from her mouth, but from the walls, the floor, the air itself. Let me store you, Elias. Let me put your pain where it won't make a sound anymore. I ran down the hallway, into the dark, through doors that opened and closed like blinking eyes. The typewriter followed, its voice now faster, louder, keys punching. Subject unstable, containment breach. Identity collapse in progress, language unsensed. Host regression initiated. I found the final door, wooden, cracked, etched with one phrase. Last chance to end the story. I opened it. Inside, a hospital room, modern, clean. I was in the bed. I hooked to machines. EEG wires, breathing tube, monitors flashing irregular brain waves. A doctor stood over me, face hidden, voice familiar. He whispered, he's been under for weeks. Brains stuck in recursive trauma cycle. Keeps trying to finish a story. Every time he gets close, it starts over. Another voice answered, female, older. Is he suffering? The doctor shrugged. He doesn't know what's real, but he believes the pain. I reached for the bed, tried to touch myself, and the second I did, the entire scene collapsed into static, like a videotape crumpled and fed through a meat grinder. I was back in the spiral, no time, no place, just pattern. A voice inside me said, you've reached the center, and then write the ending, Elias, or we'll write it for you. I tried to write the ending. Sat on the ground, notebook in my lap, pen in my hand, my body shook, my thoughts slipped like all through a fist. But I wrote anyway, forced the words, and then Elias Thorne woke up. I stared at the sentence. It didn't feel real. It felt like a joke, like someone else's wish written in my voice. The page went blank, dot, dot, not by fading, not by ink running, by refusal. The story rejected it. The page hissed, curled, turned black at the edges like it had been burned by disbelief. A voice behind me, dot, dot, soft, calm, familiar. That's not how this ends. I turned. Lena, or something, wearing her. She stood in a doorway that hadn't been there a second ago, backlit, tall, her face flickering like a film reel stuck on a single frame. You keep trying to escape through narrative, through logic, through identity, but the spiral isn't about getting out. It's about returning. I stood. You're not Lena, she smiled. Neither are you. She raised a hand, pointed at my chest. I looked down. The spiral was glowing, faint, white hot, pulsing in time with a rhythm I'd stopped noticing. My own heartbeat, no, not mine, the story's. I felt it then, not just in my skin, in my syntax, in the structure of my sentences. I was no longer writing this story. I was being written. I tried again, scribbled a new ending. Elias Thorne broke the loop by choosing silence. The words sat there, still, waiting, and for a moment I believed it. I closed my eyes. Silence bloomed, deep, comforting, full. But silence in the spiral isn't peace. It's prelude, a pre-recorded pause between loops, the quiet between scream and echo. I opened my eyes. The page had changed. Elias Thorne broke the loop by choosing silence beneath it. But silence is still a story. The letters bled, rearranged. A new line formed. We are still listening. The room changed. The notebook vanished. The floor became glass beneath me. Every version of myself I had ever imagined. They crawled, they prayed, they screamed. They sat quietly, hands folded, whispering lullabies to nothing. Above me, nothing but eyes, thousands, all unblinking, watching, waiting for the final line. And I understood. There is no ending. There is only containment, a loop seal, not by closure, but by belief. If I wrote the wrong ending, the story would continue. If I wrote the right one, it would replace me. The only true silence was unread pages, so I made my choice. I stood, faced the mirror, the final mirror. It showed nothing, and I whispered, I am the narrator now. And I choose to withhold the ending. The world rippled, a tremor, a tearing. The sound of a book slamming shut hard enough to bruise, and then stillness, real stillness. No spiral, no song, no story. I opened my eyes in a hospital room. Modern, real machines humming. A nurse turned, smiled. Welcome back, Dr. Thorne. You've been asleep a long time. I said nothing, because I wasn't sure if this was real, because I knew what silence really was now, because I knew the spiral never ends. It just waits for someone to start asking again. On the bedside table, a notebook, my notebook blank, except for one line, center of the first page, for 13 a.m. The world outside felt thinner than I remembered, brighter, yes, but not warm, not comforting, more like a simulation left running too long, a set with most of the props missing. The nurse smiled to Wyatt. The doctor never blinked. The hallway smelled like printer toner and vinegar. They said I'd been comatose for 11 days, found alone in a motel. No ID, just a name scrawled on the wall above the bed. Thorne file pending. I asked about Lena. No record. Asked about Caldera. No such facility exists. I checked the map. No such town, no such county. Everything I remembered was gone, worse replaced. Discharged 3 days later, I returned to my apartment, still mine, unused, cold, mail stacked on the floor like driftwood, fridge buzzing, photos in frames where my face had started to blur, not literally, not physically, just in my mind, like the memory of me was becoming an impression. I started writing again, not for closure, for evidence. Every detail I could recall down to the dust on the floor of room 17B, the box, the mirror, the lullabies, the dreams, the bow. I printed it all, stored it in a fireproof lockbox, labeled it simply, "Do not finish reading," because I'd learned the rule. Endings feed it, but endings also slow it down. The dreams continued nightly, at exactly for 13 a.m., same hallway, same door, same question. You remember where you buried the first scream? Sometimes when I speak aloud, I hear another voice finish my sentence. Sometimes when I listen to static, I hear my own voice recorded days before I spoke the words. Sometimes when I see a child drawing spirals in chalk on a sidewalk, I stop breathing because I know how it starts, because I know what it wants, because I know I left the door partway open. The box, the lullaby, the index. None of it was about haunting. It was about propagation. The spiral survives because it doesn't need to be true. It only needs to be told. A week after my return, a letter arrived. No stamp, no address. Inside, a photo, an overhead view of a burned-out chapel, forest circling like teeth. At the center, a spiral carved into the ground. On the back, one story ends when another one begins. You kept yours from ending, now it will keep others from starting. And at the bottom, thank you, Archivist Thorne. I burned the letter, I smashed the mirror, I taped over the clocks, but I still wake it for 13 every night, and I still write, because if I stop, it starts again. And if you've made it this far, if you're still listening, if something inside you feels colder now, or hungrier, or more observed, then you know what I know. The spiral remains, and now it knows your name too.